Have you ever been stopped by the police and wondered, what are my rights right now? Well, today we're going to break down the really complex rules around police searches, arrests, and your privacy in Canada, all before a formal charge is even on the table. Let's dive in.
So let's just get right to it with a question that honestly affects pretty much all of us these days. Can an officer just take your phone and start scrolling through your messages during a routine stop? The answer is, well, it's a lot more complicated than a simple yes or no, and it really cuts to the core of our rights as Canadians.
And that's because there's this constant push and pull in Canadian law. You've got the police, who need certain powers to investigate crimes and keep people safe. But on the other side, you've got every single citizen with rights that are protected by our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's that balancing act that we're going to dig into.
Okay, first things first, let's clear up something a lot of people mix up. Getting arrested is not the same thing as getting charged. Think of an arrest as an action the police take. They're restricting your freedom, usually to investigate something. A charge, though, that's a whole different step. That's a formal legal accusation from a Crown prosecutor, and it's what officially kicks off the court process. You can actually be arrested and then never charged. Or, sometimes, you can be charged without ever being arrested first.
All right, so now that we know the difference between an arrest and a charge, let's talk about searches. This is where that balance between police powers and your rights gets really interesting, because it's all about your privacy. And here it is, Section 8 of our Charter. It says everyone has the right to be secure against unreasonable search or seizure. Now that word unreasonable is the key to everything. So what does it actually mean? Well, as a general rule, it means police need to get a search warrant from a judge before they can search you or your property.
The whole idea of an unreasonable search all boils down to this one crucial legal idea: your reasonable expectation of privacy. The Supreme Court has spent decades trying to define exactly what this means, and it turns out it totally depends on the context.
Let's make this real. Think about your garbage. You put it in a bag, you drag it to the curb for the city to pick up. At that point, do you still have a reasonable expectation of privacy in what's inside those bags?
Well, the Supreme Court had a pretty clear answer for this one. In a case called R.V. Patrick, they decided that once you put your trash out on the curb, you've essentially abandoned it. Your privacy interest is gone. So, nope, police don't need a warrant to go through it.
Okay, so your trash is fair game. But let's jump from the curb to the cloud. What about something way more personal, like your private text messages?
Now, this is where it gets fascinating. In a really important case called R.V. Maragah, the Supreme Court said your right to privacy isn't just tied to your physical phone. It's attached to the electronic conversation itself. This was a huge deal for extending our rights into the digital age.
And the takeaway here is pretty incredible. It means your expectation of privacy in a text chain doesn't just disappear once you hit send. Even if the police are looking at your texts on your friend's phone, your privacy interest in that conversation is still protected. A warrant is still needed.
All right, let's push it even further. Every single thing you do online, your computer, your phone, your tablet, it all has an IP address. It's just a string of numbers, right? So what can it really say about you, and is it considered private? In a super recent case, R.V. Bajkovic, the Supreme Court said, yes, your IP address is absolutely protected. They called it a gateway to your private life. Why? Because that simple string of numbers can unlock so much about you: where you are, what you're looking at online, who you are. Because of that, police need a judge's permission to get it from your internet service provider.
So how do the courts figure all this out when a new case comes up? They actually have a four-part test. First, they look at what was searched. Second, they ask what your connection to that thing is. Third, did you personally expect it to be private? And fourth, and this is the big one, would a reasonable person in society agree that your expectation of privacy was in fact reasonable? Okay, so we've established that a warrant is usually the rule. But like with many rules, there are some major exceptions. The law gets that there are times when police have to act fast and can't wait for a judge to sign a piece of paper.
And here are the most common ones you'll see. Police can search you when they're lawfully arresting you. They can do a quick pat-down for weapons if they're worried about their safety. They can search in an emergency, which the law calls exigent circumstances. And of course, they can always search if you give them clear and informed consent to do so.
Let's zoom in on that exigent circumstances one, because it's really important. This isn't just about what's convenient for the police. It means there's a real emergency, a now or never situation, where they have to act immediately to prevent someone from getting hurt or to stop evidence from being destroyed. For instance, in a case called R.V. Campbell, A court said it was okay for police to act without a warrant to stop a fentanyl deal because of the immediate danger to the public.
So, we've covered searches pretty thoroughly, but what about the power of arrest itself? Just like a search, taking away someone's freedom is a massive deal, so it comes with some very strict legal rules. The standard for arresting someone without a warrant is incredibly high. For serious crimes, what the law calls indictable offenses, an officer can't just arrest you on a whim or a gut feeling. They have to have reasonable and probable grounds to believe you committed the offense.
And the Supreme Court, in a case called R.V. Story, broke that standard down into a pretty simple two-part test. First, the officer making the arrest has to personally believe that the person did it. That's the subjective part. But that's not enough. Second, that belief has to be objectively reasonable, meaning if you took a regular person and showed them the same evidence, they'd have to agree it was reasonable to believe the person was guilty. You need both.
So, we've gone through searches, privacy, garbage, texts, IP addresses, arrests. Let's bring it all together and talk about why this really matters to you, right now living in our super connected digital world.
So what do you really need to remember from all of this? Here are the big points. Number 1, the default rule is that police need a warrant to search. Number 2, your right to privacy is super powerful, but it depends on the context and it's evolving with technology. 3, the bar for police to arrest you is very high. And finally, all these rules are there for one reason, to keep that crucial balance between keeping us safe and protecting our fundamental rights.
And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. From our texts to our IP addresses, the courts have shown they're trying to make sure our charter rights keep up with technology. But as our lives become even more digital, how will they continue to walk that tightrope, balancing the power of the state with our fundamental right to privacy? It's a challenge that's only going to get more complex and, honestly, more important.